Let's talk about MTSS, or a multi-tiered system of supports, and how it is essential that schools get on board with this framework for the betterment of our students. For decades, schools have been a place where children come to learn and grow in the classroom environment. But they were founded on the idea of equality, believing that all students should be treated similarly and provided the same access to resources. And in theory, this seems like a great idea, right? Let's make sure that every student in their respective grade level receives the same exact educational experience. But what happens when a student doesn't respond to that educational experience the same way that their peers do? I was that student, and around the time I was in first grade, my mom got a call from my teacher, Mrs. Carberry, expressing her concerns with my lack of growth in the classroom. She explained that she believed I had a learning disability and would benefit from learning in a separate setting. Not long after this conversation, I began to leave my classroom each day during reading to go down the hall to a small classroom with Mrs. Finelli for my reading instruction. And while the intentions were good, it was a dramatic step to take me out of the least restrictive environment before any other interventions had been tried. You see, had my school utilized a multi-tiered system of supports prior to determining my need to learn in a separate setting, I may have had success in the classroom. Providing the right student support is not a decision one teacher makes. MTSS is not a place you go, like the little classroom down the hall. It is not just for certain students or just a block of time on the schedule. So then, what exactly is a multi-tiered system of supports? Well, it's really a compilation of practices that we are already using in schools, and they all fit under this big umbrella that we know as MTSS. So let's talk about some of the key players that fall under this umbrella. SEL, or social emotional learning, is utilized in this framework because we now know that students need to feel safe, supported, and included in the classroom community before they can fully engage in the academic curriculum. PBIS, which is a positive behavior intervention support, is an integral piece of the support system. It lays the foundations for expectations and behavioral norms within a school. RTI, or response to intervention, is a decision-based problem-solving approach that identifies students' academic needs and provides interventions at Tier 2 and 3 levels. And core curriculum also falls under the MTSS umbrella because it lays the foundation for grade-level learning and it is accessible to all students prior to additional tiers of support. In MTSS, database decision-making is used to determine which combination of these practices would best meet the needs of each child. These needs are discussed during collaborative team meetings that include both educators and parents and are then progress monitored. So when you think about all these systems that are already in place, you'll begin to realize that MTSS is not something new to implement, but a framework that is proactive and comprehensive in targeting all students across all areas of development. Why is the shift to a strong MTSS a necessary change? Because equity is at the heart of the framework, and a strong MTSS ensures that all student needs are met. MTSS digs deeper by looking at the whole child and wider by adding layers of tiered support as needed. We have come to learn that students have varying needs that must be met in order for them to experience academic success. For some students, academic interventions alone will not ensure academic goals are met. Social-emotional needs, behavioral interventions, and attendance supports all play a critical role in academic achievement. What a mindset shift to make by acknowledging that a child's inability to make friends or get along with others can, in fact, impact classroom performance. For some students, no amount of academic support is going to change learner outcomes without social-emotional layers of supports, such as restorative circles or social thinking lessons. So, instead of the idea that everyone should have access to everything, this framework considers the needs of the whole child and provides support in the specific area each child needs, as well as the tier of support they need it in. Let's look at our tiers of support. Starting with Tier 1, often referred to as the universal tier, where the core instruction and supports take place. This is where the grade-level curriculums are taught, as well as where school-wide expectations for behavior, social-emotional learning, and attendance are emphasized. Because this is the foundation of learning tiers, an MTSS model begins data analysis in Tier 1 by using universal screening data, curriculum assessments, and observations. Looking at the health of the core is an essential step in ensuring that 80 to 90% of students are having success within Tier 1. If students in the core are not performing at these levels, this is where the true problem solving begins, because schools cannot intervene their way out of a failing core. Once a strong core has been established, teams of educators will further analyze data to determine which groups of students would benefit from Tier 2 or supplemental supports. Thinking of the whole child, these supports may be academic, behavioral, or SEL-based interventions. Typically, around 10% of students will need this added layer of support. And unlike my childhood experience, where my core was swapped out for small group instruction, this tier is an added layer of support. All students in Tier 2 will continue to receive everything in Tier 1. Tier 2 is monitored closely through progress monitoring so that teams can determine when students have met their goals at an appropriate rate of improvement. Tier 2 is a flexible way of providing the layers of support as students need it. When the majority of a supplemental group has met their targeted goal, there's typically 1 to 5% of students that will go on to need individualized intensive supports, or Tier 3. This is yet another layer of support added on for this student. An intensive problem-solving team comes together to analyze student data and determine intervention and growth goals. And once again, these intensive supports could be in any area of need that make up the whole child. In this framework, nobody needs to wait or have a label to get the help that is necessary for success. It is a continual process of teams reflecting, collaborating, and analyzing student data so that each child has access to the supports that they need when they need them. So, instead of thinking of MTSS as something new or for struggling students, think of it as a framework that keeps educators focused on providing an equitable learning environment for all students.